All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
And here is to a very precious time of the day that you have chosen to listen to The Void Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Andrew Falati. And so how are you doing? Are you keeping well? Are you staying safe? Are you praying? Are you physically okay? Are you mentally fit? Are you feeding the curiosity? Because that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be feeding that curiosity. Because, when you feed the curiosity, you are learning new things, right? Because the truth is, as much as you want to do more physical exercise to gain those extra muscles, to gain that 2 extra pack, you want to make sure that you read more, you learn more, so that you become mentally fit, right? You become mentally okay. And so that's exactly what we're going to be doing on The Void Show today. So this year, one of the very big achievements of humankind happened again. So almost everyone witnessed the launch to space and to the International Space Station, right? And of course, this was by NASA and SpaceX. It contained 2 NASA astronauts. Their names, I think it's Robert and Halley. Yes, they did go to space. And this was after a very long time. The ever first in history after a very long time. The last one, it was in 2011. By NASA. That was a space shuttle program, and those are trips to space, right? Those are trips to space. And space shuttle programs, those are just it's like Earth to space transportation. So whether it's taking cargo to space or whether it's really taking any other thing to space that's necessary to be in space, those kind of activities were involved in space programs. And the last one was in 2011. And so 2020, NASA and SpaceX really took astronauts to the space. This is after a very long time, the ever first in history after a very long time, from American soil, right? From American soil, from American ground. And so a big cheer to U.S.A. for doing that. And so following that, I thought, why not speak about space science, right? Why not speak about rocket science, astronauts? What is the history behind going to space? Why do we need to go to space, right? Is it that important? Those are just some of the things we're going to be speaking about today. But before anything, let us just discuss rocket science. Rocket science. So you probably have said or have heard someone saying, oh no, that's not rocket science. And I think I should say that statement, it's not rocket science, indirectly proves the brilliance and the achievements that scientists have done so far. Because that implies, or that means, let me say that when you say no, that's not rocket science, you basically minimizing the difficultness of whatever project you'd be doing, right? You are minimizing the difficultness. So in other words, what you're trying to say is that rocket science is difficult. That's what you're trying to say, right? That's what it is. And so that's okay. So today we're going to be understanding if rocket science is really difficult. We're going to be doing that. We're going to go back in history, way back in time, and learn, and understand what was happening in the minds of people who first met the requirements of being called rocket scientists. And so this is The Void Show, and right after this we will be talking more about space visits.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Active FM.
Hot presenters,
the best topics, the most entertaining presenters, everything you could ever want in radio.
We're lifting Jesus up, we're lifting Jesus up, we're lifting.
Radio has never been better.
Okay, so let's get this done. We're speaking about space visits, we are speaking about space traveling, and that means people who go to space, right, for different kind of reasons, but most of the reasons are actually professional reasons. So they go there to work as part of their work, right? They do experiments there, they take cargo sometimes, right? So there's a lot that's really happening in space. So maybe you've always wanted to be someone who visits space, right? For maybe your personal reasons. Maybe you are someone who've always wanted to see Earth on its own, right, without being on Earth. Crazy. But maybe you someone who always wanted to view Earth like that, or maybe you always wanted to be an astronaut. Maybe it's not you, but someone you know wants to be an astronaut, so they want to go to space, they want to go to be in rockets. Maybe you're someone like that. Or maybe you are just someone who wants to see if Earth is a sphere or if it's flat. Even though that's already dealt with, but maybe you are someone who just wants to convince yourself, right? Maybe, could Earth be flat, right? Maybe that thing still comes in your mind, even though there's a lot of proof, tons of proof for a spherical Earth. So maybe you're gonna do that. We are keen to hear all those thoughts on our Facebook page. Please go to our Facebook page. Our handle is @TheVoidShow with Andrew, and make sure that you follow the page, you like the page, and you leave those thoughts there, and so that we can see them and maybe share them with everybody who's listening to The Void Show. So yes, let's go all the way back. Before the ad, I was speaking about rocket science, right? Rocket scientist. So we'll be going all the way back in time, right? Way back in time, before even people were called rocket scientists. So what happened when the name was first invented, rocket scientist, right? Very long ago, what did people have to do to be called rocket scientists? And as you could imagine, these people were designated or were referred to as very brilliant people, right? Very brilliant people, because as you would normally know, when you use the word "it's not rocket science," you are minimizing the difficultness of something. So by extension, someone you call rocket scientist would be someone of profound intelligence, right? Would be someone who possesses truly deep insights, right? So these people they had to do something that's enormous, that's very big, something that hasn't been seen before, with relation to space and to science, and then they would be called rocket scientists, right? So let us hear, what did people have to do to be called rocket scientists? Or actually, who was the first person to have the title rocket science, right? So this person, he was an American guy, right? He was an American guy, and he lived in the 19th century, not long back ago. He lived in the 19th century. And so, as you can imagine, he did a crazy thing. But before we get to that, let us first tell you his name. His name was Robert, right? If he lived in the 19th century, so that means he was born most probably from 18-something to 19-something. But I think Robert was born in 1880 something, right? So he lived in Mexico, in the United States, and so he did a crazy thing. Just think of it. Imagine this. What do you think he did to be called rocket scientist in those times? And this is very long ago, right? This was very long ago. And so people had to do crazy things to be called or to be given titles as doctors. Because, now as time goes, even the number of years people take in universities to study certain things gets reduced, right? So back in time, it's either they had to study for a very long time or they had to do something that's very crazy to be called rocket scientists, to be called astronomers, or to be called doctors, professors, right? They had to have a very long history in academia, right? So his name was Robert. He lived in the 19th century, and he built a rocket for himself. crazy. I mean, I sometimes wonder what was going in his mind. But, I think it's fair to say that people have always wanted to visit space. I think I should say that maybe when first humankind, first looked up in the sky and wondered, what's this blue color? And that night, they saw this dark color. They saw stars. It even got worse when they saw the moon. It even got worse, right? So they were curious. And so they wanted to feed their curiosity. They wanted to go to space, right? So I think it has been an idea for a very long time for people to go to space. But then this idea became practical in the 19th century by one of the American guy, right? He was a scientist before. He was a scientist before when he built a rocket for himself. It's crazy that we only celebrate people who have managed to get their ideas to life, to bring their ideas to life. It's only crazy. So we've been celebrating this guy. He built a rocket for himself. And actually before that, he published a paper titled Methods to Reach Extreme Altitudes, right? He published a paper, and after that, that's when he built a paper for himself. It was Robert. And even if you go to search engines, maybe Google, if you search Robert Goddard's work, right, with experimental rocket, you would see the kind of rocket that he built. It's a rocket, by the way. He had physics in his mind on how rockets should look like. So he knew how rockets should look like. So even if that rocket looked a bit maybe first drafty, right? If there's such a word, it looked first drafty. So you could see that this was a first draft. And obviously now we've got more complex engineers, not engineers, but we've got more complex methods that are put in place to build rockets, right? So you want to go check that. And so this rocket, the one that he built for himself, obviously he wanted to take it to space. But unfortunately, it could go to 3 kilometers. So the rocket that he built, it could only go to 3 kilometers altitude, right? So the height above sea level, it could only go to 3 kilometers. So as you could think, it's not that far in space, right? It's not that far in space. It's not in the deep space. 3 kilometers, it's still in our atmosphere. And obviously, when the years went by, the rockets became considerably more complex, and they, of course, were even launched to great heights, right? We now have satellites that are all in space, going to other planets, going to Mars, So obviously, as years went by, then more work was put into place, and these came crazy. So, there's a very interesting story that I want to share with you, and this is between America. Why is it known to be, this great country by sending humans to space, And actually, this goes way back, right? It goes way back. So, I think in 1957 or maybe somewhere there, in the 1950s. So, by that time, America had done so many attempts to reach space, right? But unfortunately, it had failed. Okay, it had failed. Of course, and this includes the one done by Robert, right? By Robert. Up until 1950, it had done so many attempts to reach space, but it had failed by that time. And so, other countries. So by that time, there was a country known as the Soviet Union, right? If you search about it, you would know that this was a very large country in the world. In those times, it was a very big country in the world. So America got frustrated. It got angry, right? It was angry. Why was it angry? That was because the Soviet Union country, was able to launch two satellites to space. And America got angry. It got frustrated. It got embarrassed, actually. Because the Soviet Union was so successful in sending its rocket to space. So Soviet Union called, if you search on the internet, it called the first satellite that it sent to space, it was called Sputnik. Sputnik, Sputnik, right? That's a Sputnik. It called it Sputnik. And because it made many missions to space, then, as they made many missions to space, then they would call it Sputnik 1, Sputnik 2, Sputnik 3, like that. But at that time, it had only sent 2 artificial satellites to space. The first one was Sputnik 1, and the work of this one, its purpose was just to go into Earth's orbit, right? It was just to go into Earth's orbit, to view Earth. And I think 1 month later, the Soviet Union, they sent another Sputnik. They called it Sputnik 2, and this one carried a live dog. If you've seen those movies that carry animals to space, Sputnik was able to do that very way back ago, and the name of the dog was called Laika. It was called Laika, right? And so America got frustrated because it got embarrassed because it could not do this, right? You know what? Right after this song, we're gonna tell more about the story of why America got frustrated and what did it do after it got embarrassed about Sputnik when it went to the mission. So here's a jam. Natasha Owens saying treasurer. So you want to hear more of the story? Stick with us. Natasha Owens saying to you, treasurer, on Radio FM, that is Active. You're still listening to Active FM, of course, and this is The Void Show with myself, your show host of all time, Andrew Falati, and we are still speaking about space visits, space travel. Thank you so much for still being here. Thank you so much for tuning in. That means you love the story that we are sharing with you. You love what we're speaking about, space visits. You love our topic today. So thank you so much for that. We really love and appreciate you. But make sure that you also do tell us your thoughts. We are there on Facebook. Our handle is at The Void Show with Andrew. It's at The Void Show with Andrew. So you want to make sure that you search that, you like and follow the page so that you share with us, how do you find the story today? How do you find the space visits, space traveling? Do you want to be an astronaut? Do you dream of being an astronaut? Do you know someone who wants to be in this field? So share all those stories on all our social media platforms. But The Void Show one, it's at The Void Show with Andrew. So if you have just scrolled to this point, you want to make sure that you go back to the beginning and really hear what we were speaking about, right? So we're speaking about space visit, and before the music, by the way, that was a nice gem. I was gonna tell you, so what did America do when it became angry, or maybe when it realized that it's lagging behind the Soviet Union, right? It realized that it's lagging behind with missions to space. So what did it do? And by the way, to just repeat, the first person to build a rocket for himself from America, his name was Robert, right? And people were like, oh my word. This is now the time when America gets frustrated, right? When it got frustrated because of Soviet Unions, right? They had sent rockets to space. So what did they do? Because of their frustration, U.S.A. hired a German scientist. And now it was sweating with pressure. It was under so much pressure. I don't know why. They were embarrassed, and so they had pressure. And so because of their pressure, they hired a German scientist, right? And this was in the 19th century. This was like in 1912 to the 1977, right? They hired a German scientist. And so his name, he had a very long name. I remember the part of his name called Van Braun, right? Van Braun. And so they hired this German scientist. And obviously, why did they do that? That's because they wanted him to beat the Soviets into space, right? Pretty obvious. They wanted him to help them beat the Soviets in space because they were now feeling the pressure. And so they hired this German scientist. And a very interesting thing about this guy is that he was involved in World War II, right? So he was involved in World War II. So he had formerly built weapons for Hitler, right? He had formerly built weapons for Hitler, and that was in World War II, right? It was definitely in World War II. So he was involved in some of the things that were happening in World War II. Like in 1945, somewhere there, near the end of the World War II. So somewhere there, the U.S. government decided to, bring this guy to the United States to help them work on missions to space. Now, so because he contributed to the World War II, many post-wars American guys, they had doubts about him, right? So they were doubting his abilities to help America to reach space, right? In other words, to beat the Unions, right? So they had doubts about him. Nevertheless, it was Braun's tireless direction, tireless work to help the United States that the United States was able to launch its first satellite. So, irregardless of whether Americans had doubts about him, it was his tireless work, his devotion to America to help. It was with his work that America was able to go to space, right? To launch its first satellite into space. And obviously, a few years later, America was able to land a man on the moon, right? And after that, America obviously quickly, suddenly gained this unquestioned leadership in space research, right? So that's what happened. And obviously, as we know, these days, rocket science rarely makes it to the headlines, right? It really makes it to the headlines. But interestingly, when we speak about rocket science, that term, rocket scientist, it still remains much more alive. It still remains very much alive. So just to share a little bit of my thoughts on the future of space science, right? Maybe objectively or personally, just where do we see space science in the future? Where would be the space science in the future? Now, by the way, for all that we have learned this far, in this show, right? We now know the background or the history behind the space visits. Who's the first person to build a rocket for himself to space? But who's the first person to build a rocket for himself into space? Who is it? It was Robert, right? It was an American guy. Now, of course, for all that we have learned this far in this show, we know who's the first person that built a rocket for himself into space. We know America sometimes in point got frustrated. We know that the Sputniks, the Soviet Union built satellites to space, artificial satellites to space. For all that we have learned to this point, even now, so many fundamental questions about our universe still remains, right? They still remain. And at this time when I'm speaking to you, so many spacecraft have been made, even Earth-based missions, they are still in operation as I speak with you, trying so hard to answer some of these questions about the universe and our planet. And so I should say that because of the imaginations, right? Because of these profound intellect imaginations that people have, right? That men and women have when they look up in the night sky or even in the day sky, right? And they start wondering about the universe. They start asking fundamental questions about the universe. Because of those kind of imaginations, we now understand the universe or the cosmos in a growing and really an unprecedented rate, right? So I should say that we live in a time where future historians will look back and, excitingly and really see the significant part that humans played, when first humankind, turned their telescopes to the heavens. Right, so we had a great show today. I love the kind of shows that we keep having these days. Last week we were speaking about aliens, right? We're speaking about the astronomers and their science. A week before that, we were speaking about the art of science, So I love the kind of topics that we've been having lately. So make sure that you don't miss this show every week. By the way, still on that point, next week episode, I've got a very interesting, I've got a very special guest who's going to be on the show. And we will be speaking about the rhymes of the universe. The rhymes of the universe. We will be speaking about that topic next week. And so we've got someone who we're gonna invite, a very special guest. So if you want to know who's that person who's gonna be joining us next week to speak about the rhymes of the universe, right? That's a very interesting topic. The rhymes of the universe. Are there rhymes in the universe? That's what we're gonna be speaking about. And so you want to make sure that you do not miss the Void Show next week. This is the Void Show. My name is Andrew Falatsi Wahahomu, and we were talking about space visits. And so right after this, I am leaving.
Rapid Trade is passionate about mobility and solutions that make a difference in your business. From mobile sales and sales management to van sales and proof of delivery. For a demo, call Rapid Trade on 011-493-9755. Rapid Trade, ahead of the game.
And we have reached the end. This is the end. This is my story. This is the end of the Void Show. Okay, we have reached the end of the Void Show. We had a great show, right? We were speaking about space visits, and if you unfortunately have crossed to this point, or maybe if you have unfortunately scrolled to this point, you have missed a lot. So please just go back to where you were and hear the kind of atmosphere that we had in a studio today. We were speaking about space visits, space traveling, American frustration, the Soviet Union going to space, who was the first person to build a rocket for himself in space, NASA and SpaceX, now they went to space, of course, and the International Space Station. So we were speaking all about that in this show, and I did say that next week we have a very special guest, and we will be speaking speaking about the rhymes of the universe. I can't wait for that. I really cannot wait for that. So you want to make sure that you do catch us again next week. By the way, to find all the shows that we have on Active FM, there is a safe platform for you to go. It is www.activefm.co.za, right? On that platform, you get all the shows that we have on Active FM. We've got shows that speak about everything that exists in this universe. So we've got shows that speak about the Bible. We've got shows just for jokes. So if you're listening to it, you just laugh all the way throughout. We've got shows that speak about philosophy, right? Philosophy of the universe and philosophy. I love it. Philosophy of the Bible, philosophy of Christians, philosophy of atheism. We've got those kind of shows. We have shows that analyze movies and speak about movies. We've got shows about music. So that's a very safe platform for you to check that all out. And we are also there on all social media platforms. We are there on Instagram. Please go follow. It's Active FM 777. Yes, search Active FM 777, and that's our Instagram handle. We are there on Facebook. Our handle is /Active FM, right? /Active FM. Then we are there on Twitter as well. The handle is @ActiveFM. And so we are there on YouTube. Yes, every week we do have shows being uploaded on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So make sure that you go there, you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you like the videos that we upload. You comment, right? Tell us what you think. And we are there. Where else? Everywhere. On TikTok, we are there, right? We are there on Google Podcast. We are there on, obviously, Google Podcast. We are there on Spotify. We are there on Spotify. So if you just search The Void Show, Active FM, you'll definitely find us. Please do follow us there. Apple's Podcast. We are there. So if you want to check all those platforms, we are all there. So this is The Void Show. My name is Andrew Faladzi, and we were speaking about space travel today. Next week, we will be speaking about the rhymes of the universe. And don't forget, we've got a very special guest for you that's going to be coming in a studio. So you want to make sure that you don't miss that. And from me, myself, and I see you same place next time, which is next week. I love you and I appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Active FM. Radio has never been better.